You have entered the Chronic's rabbit hole, and today coming down the rabbit hole is the Sabaton History Channel, and I am starting with Rise of Evil, Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party. And this is looking like it's the 20th chapter of their History Channel, and I can't wait to get into it, y'all. Welcome back to the channel, everyone, and if you are new to the channel, welcome in. This is the first time I am doing a video from the Sabaton History Channel. I went with this one because A, it was the most popular one, and B, I live in Canada, so we actually hear a lot about World War II and what happened in Germany at that time. So it's always been in my mind. I love history, I love philosophy, I love talking about these things. So I'm really excited to get into what Adolf Hitler and the Nazi parties did according to how Sabaton is going to bring it forward to us. I love Sabaton's music. All their music's always about a historical event like this. So I can't wait to see how they bring this forth, and they're going to have some crazy flair to it, which I can't wait for. One of the craziest quotes I've ever heard from Adolf Hitler, though, for me, was, "Let me control the textbooks, and I will control the state." So again, let me control the textbooks, and I will control the state. That's Adolf Hitler's own quote. And there's a lot of things going on in this world, but at least in Canada, they're changing the textbooks crazy here, almost yearly, and kids are changing yearly drastically. So there is so much power into what's in that textbook, y'all. And Adolf himself said that's how he was going to control the state, while he had all his little Nazi camps and kids getting raised up in the Nazi parties. So I can't wait to see this, y'all. That was just to give you a little bit of background as to why I picked this one first. Moving forward, let me know if you want me to start from the first one and make my way through, or if I should just pick ones that are interesting for me. All right. I'm excited to get into this, y'all.
I'm Indy Nidell.
And I'm Joachim from Sabaton.
And this is Sabaton History. Adolf Hitler's rise to power was as unlikely as his rule was catastrophic.
And our song Rise of Evil is quite unusual in the sense that it doesn't cover an armed conflict.
And he's going to tell you about the song, but first, I'm going to tell you the history.
Nice, and you get to hear the song too. Hell yes.
Now we're just getting started. We have the power, and we're not going to give it up again. With these prescient words, Adolf Hitler greeted his party members on February 5th, 1933, a few days after he was officially declared the new Chancellor of Germany. The National Socialists, his party, known also as the NSDAP, or the Nazi Party, is now the biggest party in the Reichstag, the parliament, with 33% of the seats. Now, the Communist Party has 16.9%.
Oh, wow. Something I hope they do is get into a little bit of Adolf's history as to why he rose to power, not just while he's in power. What did he do? I hope they do it a little bit.
That means that the conservative center-right and liberal center-left parties, opposed to both the communists and the Nazis, as well as each other, don't have the majority needed to form a government. Instead, under leadership of a conservative and Catholic bloc, many of the mainstream MPs plan to simply control the ambitious Hitler when he is chancellor. But Hitler was determined. His goal was to get nothing less than absolute power. He would destroy the parliamentary system, which he very much despised, and establish his Führerdiktatur by any and all means necessary. But to rise above the others, Hitler had to win over the general public, large private interests, and the powerful elements of the government and the military first. His first speech as the Chancellor of the Reich was a roundup of the topics he had unceasingly spoken about since the beginning of his political career.
Look how many people are there to support it. That is crazy. I can't imagine the times that people were living back then.
In the pubs of Munich after the First World War. But Hitler had perfected the art of public speaking, and he really knew how to work a crowd and how to paint pictures in the minds of his listeners. He spoke of the years of Marxist influence that had ruined the German economy, how the Treaty of Versailles, dictated by the malevolent victors of the war, had left the once glorious German Empire fragmented and its people impoverished. And as the listeners grew emotional, Hitler promised that he would destroy Marxism with fire and sword and free Germany from the poisonous class struggle.
Wow, with all the ideological battles that we're having right now in the world, to think that he used Marxism as a battle cry to get people to come and support because they wanted that ideological thing just destroyed. That's smart to use, and a lot of people forget that Adolf Hitler was actually in World War I and even got awards for being like heroic in there too. And he went through a lot of tragic things during the war that really warped his mind. And I'm sure the whole German people, especially after the Treaty of Versailles, how screwed German people were from that. So interesting.
Under his leadership, German society would find its way back to conservative Christian values and find renewed pride in its past. This turned non-Nazi tacit acceptance of Hitler into actual sympathy, especially from the right end of the political spectrum. However, while Hitler spoke of peace and prosperity to the public, he shifted to a bellicose, threatening, and more sinister tone in
like it says in the book of Revelation, if someone says peace and prosperity is coming upon you, just wait a couple years.
More private.
It's not going to be very peaceful after that.
Conversations. Just a few days after becoming chancellor, he met with the highest generals of the Reichswehr, Germany's handicapped army. Germany's future, Hitler insisted, is depending on the Wehrmacht and the Wehrmacht alone. Pacifism was unworthy of Germany's heritage, and according to Hitler's social Darwinistic views, Germany had to fight its way back to great power status. Getting back...
Social Darwinistic views, so survival of the fittest is what they're pushing there, right?
Lost colonies was one idea, but conquering Lebensraum in Europe's east and pursuing a ruthless Germanization was preferable to Hitler and the Nazis. Either way, to be in a position to make demands of the world, Germany's military had to undergo a massive buildup, despite the limitations imposed by the Versailles Treaty. This was exactly what those generals most wanted to hear. A strong military would consequently elevate their own positions in German society.
A nation in despair, weakened by war defeated, lost of pride in the sight, a former prisoner with a vision.
I almost feel like I have to go listen to this song after this as well. If you guys want me to check out this song, please let me know and send me a link in the comments below.
Oh, delusion, rise to power in the Reich.
As the next step, Hitler met with another powerful group, the industrials. Many shareholders of the big companies, such as IG Farben or Krupp, were initially distrustful of Hitler and his party, especially the word socialist in National Socialist Party. That had a lot of them worried that radical economic changes that would negatively affect them were on the horizon. Today in 2000...
We're a socialist country in Canada, and those things are happening to us right now.
19, there is still a debate among historians as to how socialists, the National Socialists, actually were. In terms of social policy, they were on the extreme reactionary right. Opinions vary as to their economic policy, and they likely always will. But one thing was pretty certain about the party back then. The NSDAP was broke. Election campaigns are expensive, and the lavish style of the Nazis with all the uniforms, banners, and parades was a real drain on funds. Hitler convinced the industrials, though, that socialist was a rather flexible term and that their powerful position would go untouched under his rule. Instead, there would be a lot of new contracts for them from the armament.
It's always flexible when your motto is the end justifies the means. It has to be flexible at that point because you're going to go against everything you stand for.
Industry. Again, Hitler's speaking skills transformed suspicious listeners to excited followers. And by the end of the meeting, the NSDAP coffers were filled with 3 million Reichsmarks. Wow. You got to spend money to make money, right? Now, with the support of both the military and industry, Hitler turned to his internal enemies. He made fellow Nazi Hermann Goering, famous World War I fighter pilot, and in 1933 president of the Reichstag and minister without portfolio, Reichskommissar of the Prussian Department of the Interior and minister-president of Prussia. which meant nothing less than that Goering now commanded both the police and the administration of the Prussian state. And he immediately purged both institutions of enemies of the Nazis and formed the Gestapo, the secret police.
Wow.
The Nazi paramilitary organizations SS, SA, and Stahlhelm now ran rampant, targeting their enemies and settling scores both old and new. Their victims were mostly communists and social democrats at this point. But other critics of the Nazis fell prey to the violent mob or to corrupt police officers. They busted up election meetings. They jumped and arrested people on the streets or dragged them out of their homes at night.
Wow,
In the brown barracks, the enemies of the Nazis were brutally beaten, tortured, and often outright killed without consequence for the murderers. It was a brutal terror that swept the Prussian state, but was in fact only an omen of what was to come for the rest of the country once the Nazis got control of the entire government system.
Jeez.
Officially, this was explained by Hitler as preventing the imminent communist revolution. That actually was believed by large parts of the public because the danger of the communist threat, the Red Scare, had been hyped by politicians across the spectrum since World War I.
Right.
The Reichstag fire, the burning of the German parliament building on February 27th, was just another catalyst to further escalate the violence. To this day, there are those who believe that the Nazis were actually behind the attack on the Reichstag, although there is no direct evidence.
A false flag event. And what's crazy, y'all, is that's what the Hegelian dialect is. You create an answer, you create an opposition, then you create an answer to that, and then in the middle is really what they wanted. So it's so crazy that they're like, the Marxists are the reason, and they're also the threat. So like it got everyone to find a scapegoat, and then also people to take down for their anger that they have, because like it's just misplaced anger, in my opinion, what's happening here, y'all. And it's just crazy to see what's going down back then and how similar a lot of this stuff is happening right now. Like I hope we're not getting to the brink of all these wars again, as obviously there's some happening in the world right now.
Of this, and in his diaries, Joseph Goebbels, Nazi propagandist, and in February 1933, soon-to-be Minister of Propaganda, gives no hints about it. But the lone Dutch communist who was captured at the scene gave Hitler the chance to push the first of many emergency laws through Parliament. As a response to the attack, the basic rights of freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and freedom of the press were immediately suspended, as was the power of the individual German states.
Rebuilding an army, make the nation proud, disregarding
this is such a well done documentary here, and it's making me think of a book called Ordinary Men, and this was a police platoon that had to start adopting these dictates from Hitler, specifically in Poland, and they ended up, all these ordinary policemen ended up having to do unspeakable things, but because their comrades all had to do it that were part of their team, anyone was allowed to not participate. Everyone just continued to participate because they didn't want their friends to have to do all the work, which was like pretty dirty work, by themselves. So they almost wanted to share the load of this tough task for work because they're just following orders, right? And man, this is just crazy how things go, and they take away your freedom of speech, the freedom of assembly, freedom of the press. Now in Canada, we are not allowed to get information from across the world. So y'all, I rely on a lot of your comments to keep me informed. So it's just crazy to think what's happening right now.
secret plans for Lebensraum. Start the Holocaust, the Reich will rise.
The terror now swept nationwide as the Gleichschaltung, the co-option of the interior ministries under Nazi rule, took effect under these emergency laws. Bit by bit, the positions in the governments of German cities and states were taken over by Nazi Party members. All police and security forces were by mid-1934 under direct control of the SS, Schutzstaffel, and its leader, Heinrich Himmler. Himmler appoints Theodor Eicke to head up the Dachau camp, and Eicke proceeds to formalize what had been a spontaneously created concentration camp system. An atmosphere of violence and fear gripped every German city in those days, and everyone knew that people could simply disappear and find themselves in the laboratory of violence. That's what the German historian Volker Ulrich called Dachau in those days.
Laboratory
Among those people who disappeared were Jews, the main villains in Hitler's worldview. Now, the takeover by Hitler triggered some rather negative reactions abroad. So the Nazis claim, with no evidence, that this is because Jews are spreading false stories of atrocities committed in Germany. In retaliation for the fictional crimes, on April 1st, 1933...
trying to find a scapegoat for what happened in World War I with these sanctions, and everyone's just so depressed and so upset of these tough years after World War I and obviously during it, and now they need a scapegoat. So like they're saying, making fictitious stories about getting people to buy into these groups that are, it's their fault that this is why we didn't win World War I, and it's just disgusting, to be honest.
Nazis call for a nationwide boycott of Jewish stores, doctors, and lawyers. Although the boycott gains little traction and only really lasts for a day, Jews were now the official enemy of the state, and the legal discrimination against Jews was soon followed by physical violence. This was very unpopular with large parts of the general public, but there was no substantial resistance among the people either. Just apathy. The terror had already done its work, and the people were terrified. And the violence and discrimination against the Jews would only increase year by year until the pogroms of Kristallnacht of 1938, when Jews were killed or sent to camps by the thousands, their synagogues burned, their homes, prayer rooms, and graveyards destroyed. Beginning November 1938, they are incarcerated simply for being Jews. Back again in 1933, on May 1st, the National Socialist Party celebrated the Tag der Arbeit, Labor Day, as an official holiday with huge parades and tens of thousands of workers listening to Hitler's speeches on the radio. Hitler had promised to reduce the high unemployment rate by gigantic construction projects like the Autobahn. Fairly short-term solution, sure, but the idea worked, and the traditional left-leaning workers put their trust in Hitler. The next day, the last real threat to Nazi rule that could have united large parts of society, the unions, accepted their dissolution without a fight. Instead, the NSDAP had gained over 2 million members in just those 3 months of 1933 alone.
Crazy.
And the Nazis had successfully destroyed any opposition to their rule. Everyone who thought Hitler controllable, everyone who thought the Nazis would never gain real power, and everyone who had hesitated to organize a coordinated resistance to the violence was now rendered powerless. The Nazis had taken control over every vital institution in Germany, and they were not about to give up that power. The swastika flew next to the national colors and would soon replace them as the flag of the German Reich. From the very beginning, Hitler had not only been determined to obtain absolute power, but he had also been completely open about his plans.
Yeah, he was.
His ambitions, declared in his book Mein Kampf, were by no means a secret, but nearly everybody had underestimated the ruthlessness of the former corporal from Austria. One party, one belief, one conviction, as Goebbels dictated. All other parties must be eradicated, and only the Nazi Party shall remain.
If you give this much control to one party or one person, I mean, power absolutely corrupts every single time, and I don't think they really had the best goals to begin with when you're trying to eradicate specific people and beliefs completely out of history, and not even allowing freedom of thought, because that's what freedom of speech is, y'all. You can't even think correctly if you can't speak correctly. They are tied together, y'all. So it's just insane. And I remember growing up, I always asked this question to my teachers. I'm like, well, if everyone who were Jews were then getting taken out and killed like this, why wouldn't people just pretend to renounce their faith? Because back then I never realized how much your ideological presuppositions actually mean to you. Your body like sometimes can't drop information that it already has, and like so it's hard for people to move on from what they know. And I remember I never got a good answer for that, because I'm like, if you could just say you're not a Jew, then is it purely based on your ethnicity, and like, or was it because of your belief in the Jews' laws and all that, right? So that's a question I guess I have, if any of you guys know and what you think about that. But it's crazy how fast things can move when there's no resistance. Evil things will happen when good people don't say anything, don't tell the truth, and be cowards, no offense. If we keep being cowards, these parties that want to push their power because they only believe in power, that's what they believe in. They don't believe in truth. It's just power. So that's what is allowed to happen when good people let these people run the show, right? Wow.
With Germany under his control, Hitler moved on to the next phase of his grand vision. His gaze wandered outwards, across the borders drawn in 1919. The Fuhrer looked towards Austria, Czechoslovakia, Poland, and Lithuania, to the countries that he saw as bearing the stigma of the Versailles Treaty, nations where a large ethnic German population lived under what Hitler considered foreign rule. Reversing or breaking that treaty was the next step in Hitler's plans, but that would take time to prepare. And until then, Hitler had to rely on bait-and-switch tactics. Dishonesty was his weapon of choice, to test the weakness and the gullibility of the other European powers. While the Wehrmacht was preparing and rebuilding under the swastika, the Fuhrer's plans for the expansion of the Third Reich were set in motion. Hitler was growing ready to wager Germany's future in an all-or-nothing gamble. There would be no 1918 ever again. Germany would return to glory, or it would perish.
Rise of Evil, just by the nature of its subject matter, it's got to be a little bit controversial, right? I mean, has that ever come to haunt you?
Not really haunt us, but it is a controversial subject. It's about how Adolf Hitler came to power. And let's just say the promoters in especially Germany weren't really looking forward to us performing that song live. However, I mean, as soon as we explained to them that, you know, we are a band that sings about military history, controversial subjects will arise from time to time. However, we don't ever do any kind of political or religious propaganda. And this song is simply about how Adolf Hitler came to power.
Well, it's not pro-Nazi, it's telling a story.
Absolutely. And we can't really tell a story about World War II without somehow including Adolf Hitler or the Nazis.
No,
you probably have to mention them once in a while.
Yeah, you have to mention the war.
No, but you have a lot of fans all over the world, and they're going to be of all different nations and all different backgrounds and all different political figures. You must have extremists from all kinds of stripes, including you must have some fans around there that are pro-Nazi. That's going to happen just by the number of fans you have.
Yeah, I mean, we've been accused of being almost everything because we cover so many subjects for so many different points of view.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm sorry to say this, but I don't actually give a shit what people who listen to us think.
Right.
I don't give a shit
Good
about the religion, the color of their skin, or anything. Everything is fine. But please, you know, consider it like genitals. It's okay to have, but don't whip them out in public.
Okay.
I like that.
So
you hear that, Tommy?
So it's like all we care about is we don't want our music in any way used for political or religious reasons.
Yes.
We don't want to compromise on our neutrality. We want to be able to tell stories from all kinds of views, not by judging what's wrong or right, but simply because we find that way of telling the story the most interesting one.
Yeah.
But we do know we're walking into minefields sometimes.
Sure.
That's a good example also with doing the whole Carolus Rex album, doing it in Swedish as well, because in many ways that is considered extreme right-wing in Sweden. We've been called communists as well because of doing the Songatero Dominatus about the final battle of Berlin.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Jeez.
You can keep accusing us of our political views, but the simple fact is we don't really have any message with our music other than to tell these stories.
I think that was very well said. Well, that is it for
Very
today
well said.
for Sabaton History.
Incredible. Loved it.
All right, everyone. Remember to support us on Patreon. Check out the other videos we got. They're good. And also, don't forget Time Ghost and World War II. Take care, everyone.
That is beautiful. I love this. So happy to finally do it. A Time Ghost co-production. Wow, and that swastika with the circle around it when it was like on their building there, it almost looked like a Stargate type of thing, because they were really into occult knowledge as well. I don't know if you guys have read any of the stuff that Hitler and all of his Secret Service were looking into. They were looking for the Holy Grail. They were searching for everything in the world that had any esoteric or Gnostic meaning to it, and it's just really incredible to see how many people love just history itself. And the best way that Joachim said it there is how there's not like, we're not trying to push a religion, we're not trying to push a political view, we just want to tell the story, because they love their music, they love their art, but they love telling a story with it. That's what gets them going. So it's not like they are communists if they're talking about that stuff. It's not like they're Nazis if they're talking about that stuff either. I think you should have the ability to read your history, no matter how bloody it is, and to understand and learn something from it, because I think we all got to learn something from the history. Because take it from Canada, someone in Canada right now, watching that is very kind of scary, y'all, because a lot of these steps that had to happen before the full control are really starting to happen in our world. Like I said, we can't even get news information outside of Canada. So that's going to get really biased, and soon we're only going to have one party, I'm sure, too, and then you got no choices for anything. So it really does matter how you vote moving forward, y'all. And I think it's really cool that Sabaton go the extra mile for their fans and do something like this, and it truly is their passion, which makes sense because their music is all that. So it's really cool to finally get to this history channel. It's been a while since we've listened to anything Sabaton on the channel as well. So let me know in the comments below if you want me to do more Sabaton on the channel. If you like these history things from Sabaton and just history and like philosophy in general, let me know in the comments below if you want to see more of these things, because I really love doing this stuff and being able to talk and get my thoughts out and like have some back and forth with y'all. So if you had a good time, hit that like button and subscribe if you are new, because we are now exiting the rabbit hole, folks. Thank you so much for spending some time with me. I hope you learned something new today as well, and I hope you have a good rest of your week. Peace and love, y'all. God bless.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more Enter the Chronicness.
Special thanks to all of our YouTube, Patreon, and Buy Me a Coffee members. Thank you for all of your support.